Welcome back to the Kris Krohn Show, and I am joined with Carson. We just finished filming the episode on 401ks, and see if you could convince your wife to use it for investing in real estate.
I still attest that I did succeed, and you were taking me to the cleaners for a technicality.
So let's back up and just help everyone catch up on what's really gone down. We basically did a training on 401ks, and I found out that you have a 401k, and I'm like, why aren't we using that for investing? And I get it. Like most people out there, how do you think they feel? How does your wife feel about the purpose of a 401k?
Most people are very nervous about pulling it out. It's like their retirement. It's their plan, even though that plan is probably not going to get them where they want to go. Like it's my safety net. And the idea of messing with it goes against every Dave Ramsey principle in his book.
Well, and if you think about it, the average person at 65 years old has $254,000 between 401k and IRA.
Yep.
They're also spending around $80,000 to $90,000 a year to live, which means that after 40 years of working, they've essentially saved 3 years. And it's like, wait, so I retire at 65, my 401k runs out 66, 67, 68. So what do I do at 68 years old? Well, then you
go back to Walmart.
You got to go. It's not back to Walmart. Walmart's probably a downgrade from your $80,000 or $90,000 because the reality is you're not marketable at the same level that you likely were before.
Yep.
And so now everything starts diminishing, not just your health, but opportunity.
But Chris, what if I annuitize that $250,000?
Well, let's talk about if we annuitize your $18,000 401k.
That was a jab. That was a jab, Chris.
No. Okay, here we go. $254,000. I'm going to put that in my calculator right here, everybody. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to times that by 0.0325, which basically means 3.25%. You're going to get $8,255 a year.
A year.
Or you're going to get $687 a month.
But if I pay off my house, can I live on $600,000?
Here's what they're thinking. I'm going to get $687.
Yep.
And if I add Social Security to it, and let's say that's $1,800, now you're basically living off of $2,400 a month.
I don't want to take this in a weird direction, but I bet a lot of people would want to know, do you think Social Security is going to be around in 20 years?
You know, everyone loves to conspiracy theory that, say it's not going to be, but what does our government have a history of doing? When we need more money, what do?
We borrow from China.
Or we just print it, we devalue our own dollar, or we borrow it. We're like $36 trillion in debt, but we bring in from tax revenue about $4 trillion a year. And now we have $1 trillion of that plus that is servicing debt. So with $36 trillion in debt, it costs $1 million to service it, $1 trillion, and we only have $4 trillion to work with. So it's like, how would you feel if 25% of your income was going towards just servicing debt?
It's a lot. You're saying it's just paying the interest on it. It's not paying down the principal?
So here's the dilemma with 401k. A person is used to living off of $7,500 a month. At retirement, they now have to drop down below $2,500 a month. So it's drastic. Now it's like, well, I did the Dave Ramsey thing. I paid off my home. I thought it gave me security, but I'm learning now that it was a false sense of security and it was an illusion because now I have to sell it and downgrade into a condo. Maybe that'll be paid off. Yeah, you're only going to get a couple more years worth of money and then that's run out too. That's more realistically what people have to prepare for in retirement if they're using 401ks and IRAs.
So why do you think people are still so protective?
It's weird. I think that we have rituals and traditions that's running up against logic. Because here's logic. I just used 5th grade math to forecast money. So let me use that same math and say, okay, if you had $3.1 million, which the average person, that's like 10 times more money than they've saved for retirement. But if they had it, then they could annuitize that and that would produce about $90,000 a year that they're living on, which means that we're falling extremely short of what we need. Now that's rational logic. Anyone can pull out a calculator and more or less figure that out.
Yeah, but I honestly think it's because people don't see an alternative, Chris. Like you have made alternatives because you are creative, a go-getter, a producer, and you had higher standards where you're like, I don't accept this.
Do you want to know why I made alternatives in the first place?
Why?
I was going to college and my wife and I, we found each other really early. So I got married literally in my sophomore year. So very young.
Of college, folks.
Not high school.
Not
college.
high school.
But I got a full-time job where I'm telemarketing. Because it's like without a college degree, back when I went to college, everyone was like, you have to have a degree to get anywhere in life. And I was like, I felt all of this pressure from traditions and rituals saying you're supposed to do that. So I went to college full-time and I had a full-time job. This telemarketing job had me talking to people in their 50s and 60s. And these people, by way of avatar, they had been to college 30 years earlier, and they had been 401k, IRAing, and house payer offering. So they were following society's white picket like game plan. And here's what I found. People in their 50s maybe had a couple $100,000 for retirement. Maybe their house was half paid off. And by the time they got to that age and I was talking to them, I'm just a young, dumb college kid, but they're panicking and freaking out because they're like, wait, I'm a decade away. I've been working for 30 years. I have a decade left. I'm 75% through. And now I'm starting to do the math and realize I don't have nearly enough money. And when they panic, it's because they're now forced to try to find better investments than a 401k or an IRA that delivers single digit returns.
At that point, you're out of time though. Like 10 years isn't a lot.
No, you don't have enough time to let your money compound. You then need to do super risky things, and that's what they would do, and then they would risk and lose money. But now imagine being 21, 22 years old and talking to 55-year-olds. I'm in college. I can't even figure out what major I'm to declare. I thought I wanted to be a doctor, and after taking organic chemistry twice and getting a worse grade, a C- on the second go around, I'm like, that's not for me. There's no other major to declare that pays that much, so now it's just downhill from here. And yet that year I talked to a couple thousand people who went to college, had good paying jobs. Most of them in their 50s now were making between 70 and 150,000 a year. And I saw how much they were struggling. And it was like looking through a window thinking, that's going to be me if I stick on this path. And so I had a midlife crisis at 22. Like I freaked out and I'm like, oh my gosh, hyperventilating. Like my parents are telling me to go to college. My in-laws are telling me to go to college. My wife's telling me to go to college. But I've just talked to 2,000 people who went to college and they're financially conservative and safe. And guess what? It didn't work. And all of a sudden I just started doing the math and I started realizing it's actually not going to work. For example, let's say you got a really high paying job. You're a lawyer and you're making $400,000 a year. According to Parkinson's law, you're now going to spend 90% of that, right? You're going to spend that money plus or minus 10%. So all you have is a nicer house and a nicer car. You're actually not getting proportionally further ahead. Let's say that person has $800,000 for retirement, but they're trying to replace a $400,000 income. Proportionally, it's no different than someone that makes $50,000 a year and only has $80,000 saved for retirement. Both are screwed equally. And that's what I realized. And that's when I said, okay, I have to invent something outside the box.
I want to come back to this something outside the box, but a lot of people hear this and they're like, but you did get a degree. There's this huge debate whether or not degrees are useful. And I just got to know, do you attribute any of your success since then to the degree you got?
No.
Like, there's not even like, well, I kind of learned the skills of like turning things in on time and like being a hard worker, or I learned the skills of interacting with other students and that helped me. You don't attribute anything.
So I'm an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs are rule breakers. They're trying to create value where value doesn't exist in the world. Pushing paper, turning in assignments, and doing things on time. There may be some benefit in that for some people. I didn't have any benefit in that because I already figured that stuff out in junior high and high school. I had a very strict German father that demanded good grades. They didn't always come easy for me. I think I graduated with like a 3.6 or something like that, which meant I got a lot of A's, but I got some B's and B pluses. And I already figured a lot of that out. But entrepreneurship is way more about street smarts, not academic smarts. But I remember my mother-in-law who just adamant, like she saw that my portfolio was growing. She saw that I was making really good money. I had now at 6 figures at my job. It was a sales job. I could see her stress. She's like, you got to get that degree. You won't get anywhere in life without that degree. I felt like pressure. I felt like I got my degree from my mother-in-law. And she's like, I'm sure it's going to I'm sure there's benefit in it. I was like, no, there was actually no benefit at all. I got a degree to please my wife and to please my in-laws more than anything. Do I regret having it? No, of course not. Like my wife and I both got a degree in marriage, family, human development. It's basically a degree in how to raise a family. We put that to work. But then later I was honored with an honorary MBA for my success in business. And I spoke at a graduating class at university. And I remember when I got it, it didn't make me feel special or smart, but what the university was trying to acknowledge is that you, at an honorary level, have put in your Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours. You deserve an MBA, except I would say I was living the real world MBA, and I learned how to get a real MBA, a massive bank account. And it came from making all sorts of mistakes and learning what not to do. College actually doesn't do that.
So I saw this really interesting quote that was talking about how people who are really tied to academics struggle in the career world. And they're like, because academia is centered around always getting the right answer, never failing. You're always trying to get an A. You're trying to be 95, 100% right all the time. And it's like, it trains in you to not take risks. Academia trains you to not take risks. And they're like, so if you love academia, you're going to struggle being an entrepreneur because about failing.
There was something, though, that I really enjoyed about my school experience. Like a lot of entrepreneurs, there were parts of school that didn't come easy for me. With all this pressure to go to college, I was taking the ACT and the SAT. And the first time I took the SAT, I think my combined best score was like 1,000, which meant that I was performing below average. And then I studied how to take the test. And I took it 2 more times, and then I had a combined score of like a 1450, which is not a 1600, but it's actually a really high score. That score got me into the college that I wanted to get into. And what I actually appreciated was they were not testing my knowledge like it was maybe supposed to. They were testing my ability to know how to test. In other words, I knew how to get what I wanted. And so I did appreciate something in that. I got 4 kids. I might have 1 or 2 that go to college, but they ask like, Dad, should I go to college? And I'm like, I really don't know. Like, what do you want to do? And will it further that? I almost see college more like the rest of childhood. Like 18-year-olds really aren't ready to leave the house, in my opinion, in most cases. So they go and move away from home. And then they spend on average 5 years at a university, finishing raising themselves, trying to figure out who they are, experimenting, trying to figure out what they want with their life. And I think that sometimes the social component, more than what they learn, is even more important. But you don't have to pay $250,000 to go to college to figure that out. So my kids are trained to be entrepreneurs. They have businesses. They're doing different things. And when they get older, we'll see what they decide to do. But frankly, it's their life. It's their choice. I'm not going to pressure them, by the way.
I feel incredibly blessed, Kris, because you've taken me on as your apprentice and you're teaching me these things. And honestly, they're things that you just don't hear in a lot of other places. They're considered unorthodox.
Yeah.
And I just feel like it's this huge unfair advantage that I have, that I've learned a lot of these things. But when I go out there into the world with family, friends, like they look at it as so bass-ackwards.
Yes, everything is upside down and inverted, right?
And yet I'm like, but the answer is to like invest in these other vehicles. And they're like, but that's so risky.
Unfortunately, society really wants us to believe that the best life is the one where we don't take risks. And the strange thing is that by not taking risks, we take the greatest risk of all. We guarantee, financially at least, that we're not going to wind up where we want to land. And the sad thing is people have goals and dreams cost not money, they cost people. Like to make money, you have to exchange and create value for a lot of human beings. Like someone says, well, I want $3 million at retirement. I'm like, cool, you're on track for 1/10 of that through a 401k. How are you going to bridge the gap on the other 2.7? You'd have to find a way to create value. You go and say, well, I'm going to buy a rental every 5 years. Well, by the time you retire and you have a portfolio of maybe 5, 6, or 7 homes, you're probably honestly worth $3+ million. Guess what? Why did you receive that money? Well, you created value. It's the same reason why the government gives us tax write-offs when we provide housing for other people. You get to depreciate it and write it off. You provided a home for someone. That's not a little value. Think how much value that would be to the homeless person. It's a huge thing in the infrastructure of our government and community that you're providing. And if you go to a nice neighborhood and have a nice house next to nice schools, that family is really going to appreciate that house. You have 7 of those, you created value day after day, 4 years, you kept people warm, you kept their roof over their head, and what did you get rewarded with? Money. That's the way that we need to think. Entrepreneurs are always thinking, how do I create value to bridge the gap and get what I want? It takes a lot of people, though, to be able to do that.
If you spend any time watching a number of soccer games, you'll kind of learn that there's a difference between playing to not lose and playing to win. And I kind of feel like 401, like the more you've taught me, I'm like 401k kind of feels like I'm playing to not lose. It's like, if all I get at the end of the day is this one loaf of bread, well, at least I have that one loaf of bread and I'm going to find a way to be satisfied with it.
I'll tell you right now what my problem is with a 401k, and I'll do the math. I want to introduce you to something called the Rule of 72. Galileo, or some old dude in the 1500s, said compound interest is a complex formula, but we found a cheat code. If you divide your interest rate into 72, it will reveal how long it takes to double. So I'm going to take the number 72, and we just had a report come out that the average 401k makes 4.2% over the last 20 years. Yeah. So 72 divided by 4.2 equals 17. Which means in 17 years, your 401k will double. Then you think, well, I only have a 40-year working life. That's almost half my working life. You mean that I'm going to double my 401k 2.5 times? That's what that tells you.
Well, and I think an important distinction is that's from the starting point, and your 401k doesn't start with $250,000.
No, it starts with much less.
It starts with maybe
But actually, regardless of how much you put in,
but even if you started with it,
it shows you what it takes to double. So then you start saying, okay, well, what about my IRA? Like my tax guy says that I can reduce my taxes by putting money into an IRA. So I'm like, okay, 72 divided by the 30-year average on an IRA is 5%. Your money doubles every 14 and a half years. Well, then you say, well, my guy's putting it in an annuity. I'm like, okay, cool. Let's divide that by 3%. Every 24 years it doubles. So what that tells you is single digits If you wanted $3 million, but your 50,000 is only going to double and you get to do it twice in your working life, maybe 3 times, that's when you realize, well, wait a second. If I put $100,000 into a 401k and it triples 3 times, that's $400,000, my 100, maybe $300,000. That's not $3 million. So that's when I said, okay, single digits are out. You would need lifetimes for that money to mature into millions of dollars. So then I said, well, what's the next safest thing that I can do with money? And this is where we get to your conversation with Shalina on your $18,000. Yes. And Shalina's right. In the episode, she says, Carson, $18,000 is not enough for a down payment. She's right, but it's enough for part of a down payment.
Yeah.
And you got that and you conveyed that to her. So it's like, why real estate? I won't touch a deal unless we earn at least what percent? I'm going to quiz you here.
25.
25%. So let's take 72. Let's divide it by 25. Your money doubles every 2.88 years. Haven't you experienced that?
Yes.
My real estate averages 60%. So 72 divided by 60 means that my money doubles every 1.2 years.
It gives your money time to grow.
And that's why 90% of all millionaires make their money in real estate. It's because it's a higher ROI. The crazy part is that people say, yeah, but that's higher risk. And I'm like, okay, now I'm going to go crazy on you. The stock market resets and falls every 7 years. 2008, stock accounts dropped 50%. Just if you look at the most recent one, it was August 2024, dropped 37%. We are used to basically, and it always takes 3 years at the latest to come back. Every 7 years, our accounts go through massive turbulence based on an economy that no one can guesstimate or forecast to earn 5%. Or in the S&P, 8%, which over the next decade is projected to drop to 3.5%. So I'm like, that's risky, but why are people doing it? Tradition and ritual, not logic. Logically, it makes no sense. Right. It's emotional. When everyone else, when all the lemmings are lining up to jump over the cliff, everyone's like, I feel great about this because I'm with my buddies.
I'm with my buddies. Well, and the other thing is I feel like we forget those downturns. Like I remember my father-in-law when he lost a ton in his 401k and he was like, this sucks. But if you talk to him now, it's like, well, the economy's doing good again, so I'm back in.
And what they do is they're not looking at the 30-year average. Yes. They're looking at the moment. There was a real estate partner of mine that basically had it was like $600,000 in his 401k. That was a lot of money. And this is like 2007. And I sit down with him, I do a game plan. He's got all this money. He's a high level up executive in 7-Eleven. And so he had a good 401k. And I looked at him and I said, put that money into real estate. He's like, but I got to pay the tax and penalties. I said, I'll help you avoid taxes and penalties. Here's how to do it. Well, he didn't do it. And then
this was in 07.
The crash happened in 08 fall. I remember he met with me the next year and his account balance was at like $250,000 or $300,000. And he was devastated. He says, I wish I had pulled all of it out and put it into real estate. And see, that's the problem when you can't time the market. You can't time it. The smartest people, Warren Buffett, Elon Musk, they cannot tell you when the stock market's going to drop. Real estate, I can tell you exactly when it's going to drop. It's a function of supply and demand. So oddly, real estate at 25% makes over 20 years, 27 times more money than the 401k. I just got to say it one more time. Real estate, when you're earning 25%, which I do in my sleep, I make 60. But even if you're just doing 25, it makes 27 times more money over 20 years. Why is that important? The first 20 years of your life, you amassed a little bit in a 401k, and now you have 20 years left. You're sitting in the middle of your life and you're realizing, my plan isn't working. I spent the first few years at a dead-end job. I got my degree. Then I had to climb the corporate ladder. I started then putting something into a 401k. Now I got a little bit and I'm halfway through my journey. And I'm like, yeah, the last 20 years between 45 and 65, take that little bit you got, put it in real estate and make 27 times more money. It's millions. It's literally one house turns into $4.3 million as opposed to $254,000 in a 401k. One, you fall dramatically short. And one, you're not rich, but you're going to have a really, really comfortable retirement.
Like you said, it makes a lot of sense. And I'm getting to where I'm wrapping my mind around this and starting to understand.
No, I think you're getting to wrap your mind around a pink
tutu. Oh my gosh, that's where I was going to go. I just want to say one more time, Kris, that I convinced my wife. She's willing to put it into real estate.
Yeah, the tape says otherwise.
This is bull crap.
For those of you that didn't watch the episode, Carson was tasked with convincing his wife, Shalina, to pull their 401k out for real estate. He didn't quite succeed at the challenge and the punishment. He's got to wear a pink tutu, go to the mall. He's got to do 100 burpees.
We're doing it here shortly. Not going to say I'm excited about it.
How could you be excited? Bro, give me your man card right now. Don't fail your next assignment, okay?
Let's get this over with as soon as possible.
And in the meantime, let's use that 401k and let's talk about something smart to do with it.
Yep. I'm there, man. Boom.